Okay, thank you so much for joining me today. This is Isaiah Perez, and I want to talk to you today about my next upcoming book, Why Race Doesn't Matter. And I do want to talk about this issue from a variety of different ways. But today, I do want to tell you a little bit about my background and about why I think I'm in a very unique position to talk about this issue. So I want to share a little bit about my background and also read the introduction chapter. Over the course of the next few weeks, I will be releasing some more chapters, um, but I am going to make this available for download in the future. But for right now, I just kind of want to get people interested in this topic and the project that I've been working on. For the last couple of years, I have been helping Jeff Scoop's organization. And in case you're not aware of Jeff Scoop, he was part of the largest neo-Nazi organization in America, and he was able to leave a life full of violence, hatred, bigotry, and now he's a peace advocate who goes all over the world, spreading this peace message that really needs to be heard by a lot of people. And so, um, I have been helping him and his organization, which is called Beyond Barriers, and he has he has been doing his own podcast, and he's also recently done his own book. And so I have helped him out financially and with stuff like suits and computers and other stuff like that, but I've decided to donate all the proceeds of this book to his organization to help get this message of peace and tolerance and forgiveness. Just has such a strong message. So I am also going to be, if you would like to purchase an advanced copy, I am going to be making some different tiers for Kickstarter campaign because I really would like to get this done, edited properly, to be able to reach as many people as possible, to change, change lives, and to really fight the fundamental elements of racism, which is I'm going to get into a little bit of that today. So I do want to read the first chapter. This actually isn't the chapter. This is just the introduction. But yeah, here we go. Every section starts off with a quote. And the times that I'm stopping for a second and I'll read a line, that is because there is it's a new section right here. So just try to remember that. Anytime there's these long blocks of pauses, starting a new section. So the first quote is, "Duty is what one expects from others. It is not what one does oneself." The author is Oscar Wilde. Okay. While writing my second book, American Abroad, Tales of Re-Education on a Road Less Traveled, I made many observations that were relevant but not exactly appropriate for the theme of the book. The book detailed my journey overseas in my expedition of self-discovery and healing. During the course of editing, I found that many elements might come off as distracting and perhaps off-putting. As relevant or interesting as they may have been, the theme of self-exploration was a more potent and consistent concept to discuss. However, some of the bits and pieces that were whittled away seemed to have a common message that were observed from my continual sojourn. For this reason, I decided to combine many of those writings into Why Race Doesn't Matter. The issue of race has affected me directly in more ways than I could ever hope to imagine, both consciously and subconsciously, especially in the wake of the race riots of 2020. Not talking about the 2,000-ton elephant in every house, church, and office space seems like irresponsible escapism to the highest extent of the word. While it might be politically correct or convenient to avoid such topics, the thought of ignoring such pressing issues seems like slamming the snooze alarm on a continual yearly cycle. And while I might not have all the answers at hand, I do know I can add a valuable nugget of truth that may open a few eyes and hearts. Though we are not going to undo millennia of racism, ill will, or distrust overnight, the small incremental steps we can take today can pay tremendous dividends for future generations who will hopefully still be around if we succeed. The brute fact. A change must first and foremost start within if we are ever truly going to embrace the change that is necessary on a global or systematic scale. It is not remotely reasonable to expect outward change without ever being willing to take the hard task of engaging headfirst the greatest enemy of humanity, ourselves. And while it might be convenient for a while, at least, to look to others who happen to look different, there is no escaping the inevitable truth that both the savior and the villain lies within us all. This hiddenness exposed to the world has the ability to engage and befriend the other heroes and anti-heroes that are active and latent in us all, and just ready to be summoned. By admitting that we are all individually and collectively the sole source of the problem, we pave a well-intentioned road that will help others to follow suit. Yes, indeed, we are all part of the problem. And if there's ever going to be real solutions to these ever plaguing issues, we are all going to need to play a part in the solution. Like tracing a poisonous water source back to the corrupted supply, we must acknowledge that while there is plenty of blame to go around, there is more than enough inside of us all to give an inevitable verdict of guilty. And while a little poison in the well may destroy the whole lot, it is not so easy to compartmentalize blame if we are being as harsh on ourselves as we are to others. This epoch of scapegoating, gaslighting, and passing the buck must be taken headlong and with great urgency before we cross certain points of no return when all hope is lost. The need for change. There is a great meme which shows two men, one walking around with boxes of failure on his head, and the other using those failures to build a staircase to success. In fact, you can see it right here. This is the best possible analogy of growing through failure. Staying grounded and undefeated feels impeccable on a certain level. But without ever failing in life, life itself becomes a great failure. Swinging and missing are absolutely the best teachers in this mysterious world we inhabit. The sting of loss motivates us and furthermore helps us to ensure that we do not repeat the same mistakes of the past. Sadly, many of life lessons must be repeated on a continual basis, but that's okay too. Without this, progress is almost impossible. As we struggle with the ugly issue of racism, it is unfortunate that there will be many mistakes made on a grand scale. We are all going to fail in some manner or another. Sooner or later, everyone missteps. Everyone makes mistakes and says things that are insensitive, even if unintentional. It is our nature to err, to be full of pride, prejudice, and misinformation. However, we must remain persistent and do the hard work on these issues. The human spirit is tough and resilient, yet, even like steel, impurities must be removed, sometimes in fiery purification, and other times with the brute force of banging hammers. Along the road of raising the collective consciousness of our genius, there are going to be many missteps that need to be approached with care. Looking back on our own lives throughout childhood and the wandering, ephemeral teenage years, it is easy to be quite condemning of our own past actions and words. Recognizing this, however, we should stop to reflect on the journey that we meet others. The immortal Maya Angelou once wrote, "Forgive yourselves for not knowing what you didn't know before you learned it." Taking that into account, That same generosity and goodwill can be extended to others, as we need the same treatment from others as well as ourselves. Knowing that we have all misstepped and will continue to do so, to err, this should lead us to have just a little more grace from day to day. This should never diminish but only increase as we continually play the fool on a daily basis. Brute brass tacks. The euphemism of brass tacks is one of facing brutal and stark realities. There are easy ways to sugarcoat certain truths or make them more palatable, but brass tacks present no easy way to digest. Furthermore, stepping on said tacks will lead to certain injury unless caution is taken. On some occasions, we may be able to shield the effects. However, there are no real ways to avoid the inevitable damage that is going to come about by swallowing these truths. Placating and dancing around issues can be convenient only for so long. And if we truly want to overcome this obstacle of humanity, we must tread softly and swallow these tacks and take the risks as they arise. Although it may be uncomfortable at times, the greater payday comes from the wages of the hard work we all must do. It is for the sake that I am choosing to write this book in such an open, honest, and brash manner. It is literally the only way I can think to be truly effective. Furthermore, I have decided to include many anecdote stories as much as I must completely convey how these issues have shaped my life. Some may find this approach uncomfortable and without taste, but this is the remedy. Like the bitter medicine that triggers your gag reflex, a greater good is achieved by doing the undesirable. Like stinging acupuncture that is temporarily uncomfortable, the net benefit far outweighs the initial pain. Anything less than this reality contributes to the problem even further. And in the light, there is disaffection and illumination. Let us begin. So I mentioned in there a few anecdote stories, and I do want to share a little bit about my background. See, I grew up in Bakersfield, California, which is the historical backdrop of the Grapes of Wrath. For those of you who are not familiar with the Grapes of Wrath, there was something called the Dust Bowl in Oklahoma through improper agricultural practices. And it wound up causing a lot of the dust to be blown around there and made the land really badly bad for crops. So a lot of them wind up coming over to California. And that's what this book is about. And many of them were treated very badly. They were put into internment camps and they were forced to work some really bad conditions. And yeah, just the treatment of them was not nice. So needless to say, a lot of the white people that we grew up with, I'm Latino myself, but we're pretty much all in the same economic class together there in the east side of Bakersfield. There were blacks, Mexicans, and there was even one Korean family. And for those of you who might know, I am married myself to South Korea, and I do have a Korean daughter. And in this book, I do get to talk about some of the times in which I committed racism towards this Korean family. So I'm going to talk about things like that, being very honest about the kind of things that I've experienced. Also experienced some racism growing up. But at the end of the day, we all had issues, but we're all living there together relatively peacefully. I think every kid's fight, every kids are bound, they're bound not to get along at some point, whether it be over girls or sports or whatever. But, we're all like my best friend, my two best friends growing up, one of them was white and one of them was black. And this book is actually dedicated to my best friend's family, the Cowards, because basically we lived right here, and directly behind us they lived. And I would sometimes go down to their house at like 12 o'clock at night and, go out there to eat something. And my dad married him and his wife. And, we were just really good friends. I remember sometimes I would come home and I would see him just hanging out with my family. And I was like, man, Aaron, what are you doing here? You're not supposed, we're friends. You're not supposed to be here when I'm not here. But I mean, they were really genuinely that close. And I could tell you very frankly, we would make racial jokes to each other, back and forth. He would even do so in front of like my family and stuff. But it was such a non-issue for us because, it was just one of the many things we could make fun of each other about. But that was kind of the environment that I grew up in the 80s and the 90s. It's quite a bit different than it is today. And one of the chapters, I do get to deal a bit about how comedy can be used to fight racism. But I do want to share a couple other things too. What puts me in a unique position to talk about this book. Because on my mother's side, I had an aunt, her name's Ruth, and she was married to a white man, one of these Okies. And she had two sons that were about my age. We're 1 year apart. One of them was 1 year older than me, and one of them was the older one was a year older than him. So we were like two peas in the pod. I mean, my name's Isaiah Perez. Their last name was Thomas. They used to call me Isaiah Thomas. So I got to grow up with two white cousins from right there from her. And then another one of my aunts was married to a black man, a Creole, like from down south, and Louisiana, New Orleans, and so I grew up with black cousins as well. And I also grew up with half Japanese cousins as well, because my dad's sister was married to a Japanese man whose family was incidentally interned in World War II. But that's neither here nor there. I'll talk a little bit about that in the book. But the reason why I'm saying this, the reason I'm expressing this is because I grew up in a family with mixed races, with my cousins as well. I have cousins now who are got married to Koreans, Chinese, Arabic. So we've gotten a nice variety of diversity inside of my family. In addition to that, I've lived about 10 years of my life overseas and got to travel to lots of different countries and got to see lots of different sites and meet different people. And it really has significantly changed the way that I think about the world and about people. So what you'll see in the book is a very unique perspective that I think is pretty hard to get. I mean, especially if I would have stayed in America and if I would have grown in a family with just everyone was Mexican, I don't think I would have the same kind of perspective that I have now. I mean, I could tell you this, just inside of my home, my mom had a really bad childhood, and so she really wanted to help kids who had similar bad childhoods as well. So we wind up fostering about maybe around 15 kids. Some of them were just very, very short time, I might add, but maybe about 6 or 7 of them wind up staying to adulthood. And one of those ladies, her name is Danielle. And growing up, I was actually closer to her than I was to my own biological sisters. And we also had a Native American boy named Joey. And I mean, truth be told, I was closer to him than I was my own biological brother, because my biological brother was about 13 years older than me. And Joey was, I think, about 5 or 6 years older than me. So we were pretty close in age. And, and then in addition to that, there were other Caucasian, siblings that I wind up growing up with. And I'd be remiss to not mention this, but, obviously if they're living with us, they're coming from some really bad backgrounds. I am going to talk in the book greater depth, because one of these boys did come to live with us from the whole, the satanic witch hunts that took place in Bakersfield, California, Kern County. I will share some more about that because there was a lot of, a lot of really bad stuff that wound up happening to some people there. Some of it was drug related. Some of it was just absolute witch hunting. I think Sean Penn made a documentary called Witch Hunt, and it's about, what happened with these kids and with these people. And a lot of them were Caucasians and growing up in really bad environments and, with broken families. And so that being said, I do talk a bit about what this concept of white privilege, and I do get to talk about it from a unique perspective, from seeing it from a, being in basically the same situation as other white people. And there's a lot of interesting stories I'm going to talk about. There's a lot of history too. I mean, I try to keep it a mix between being academic and then also just talking about the realities of things that just exist that you see day to day, such as watching a cartoon or things like the O.J. Simpson trial. A lot of things that just happen from day to day, music and movies and such. But, I do get to talk about a little bit about food, fusion, lots of different stuff. It's not just one or two. I mean, I had to approach this issue from literally about 100 different sides. So it's bare, it's honest. I try to approach it as just as authentically as I possibly humanly could. And so that being said, I'm going to be selling some advanced copies and with some perks. If you can purchase in advance, so I could get some good editing done for this book. And also remember, this is definitely not just for me. I mean, nothing in the world would make me happier than this thing to sell 1 million copies. But that's all going to this organization because I believe in this concept of fighting hate with love and fighting, with compassion and empathy. There's an entire chapter in the book just about empathy. And I really break it down to its very elemental form. So that being said, there are going to be a few perks. If you can join one of the higher level perks, that'd be very much appreciated by me. And then, if nothing else, liking, sharing, commenting on this video, that will go a long way. Sharing it on social media, hashtagging it. If that's the extent that you can do, that will be greatly, greatly, greatly appreciated. Initially, I am going to be making some chapters here and there available. I don't want to release everything right now because no one would buy it. So I do want to try to get people's interest. But eventually, it's like I'm going to make this thing completely available for free. Maybe that might be within the next year. But I do initially want to try to sell as many copies as possible. So if that's something that you're able to do, please do so. And it will be greatly appreciated. And now let's get to chapter 1.